It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this session. Cyndi Maxey is a national speaker, author, and coach based in Chicago. She helps clients design and deliver presentations that drive performance in or outside the classroom, boardroom, meeting, or event. Together, she has uncovered the importance of personal presence for executives, doctors, nurses, trainers, educators, scientists, middle managers, technical experts, real estate managers, medical office managers, truck parts distributors, firefighters, and more. Along the way, she has co-authored 6 books on communication and presentation skills and joined the College of Communication as a part-time professor here at DePaul University. Please welcome Cyndi Maxey.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. I look forward to picking up our dust cloth and dusting off our face-to-face presentation skills. You know, whether you present in the auditorium or at a little team meeting in the cafeteria or in a board table in front of the CEO, you know, it's important that our face-to-face speaker skills are showing again. And just to have awareness of what those can be and to be practicing and be consistently conveying the impression we want to make is so, so important. So today I will be talking about those things. I've divided the program kind of into 3 segments. The first part of the program you may be surprised about because I'm going to be spending some time talking about how to prepare, what's different, what new things to think about, things that happen before we even open our mouths to speak. The second part of the program is going to be the traditional delivery basics, the things that are still the same and the things that are updated a little bit in awareness. And then the last part of the program, I'll be pulling it into some things to keep in mind when you're in charge of a meeting, how to have a good meeting, how to engage people a bit. And yes, as Effie said, please think of your questions so that I can address any particular questions or issues that you had that encouraged you to join us today for this presentation. You know, whenever we have high tech, as we had the last couple of years, where many of us, including me, were doing training and speaking and educating just online, virtually. Whenever we have high tech, high touch is very important as well. People tend to seek it out. And I think we are at the point right now as we're making our way out of constant Zoom meetings, virtual meetings, and making our way more into part-time at the office or being out addressing our clients part-time. People are needing more awareness of what I call high touch. But I think there's a balance in speaking, no matter what you're thinking of. Speaking well is a balance of charisma and credibility. And so I hope you'll keep that in mind today as well as we look at dusting off those skills that we haven't maybe been using quite so much the last couple of years. So a little story. I was once talking to a client of mine, and we were just starting a coaching session, and she had just finished her first triathlon. And I was asking her about it, and I was, applauding her for it. That's wonderful, wonderful. What did you learn? And she said, well, I practiced everything. I trained, and I knew that in the swimming competition that it would be really crowded. People had told me people are going to swim very near you, even, maybe on top of you. So I was mentally ready for that. But she said one thing I wasn't ready for, and that was the cold water of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. I got so cold that the rest of my race was affected and not as good. And we were smiling about that as a particular analogy to perhaps what it's like to speaking. We can prepare. We can do everything we know possible to do a successful, professional, energized presentation. And it's not going to be perfect. In fact, when I talk about the 3 P's of speaking, I talk about good for practicality, practical, everyone should be good in front of a group, good for the psyche, it feels good to deliver your ideas and have people listen and share them. And also it's powerful. Research has shown that just simply standing up in front of a group and speaking, that group asserts gives you more power than they have. So tip number 1, whenever you have an opportunity to stand, do it because it non-verbally gives you power. Even a small group, if you're showing a few slides, around a table, you have 3 people, you might want to consider standing, showing the slides, and sitting back down. So as we work today together around, the kinds of things that are showing, I would like for you to think about these 4 things that I came up with that I, based in my work with students and my clients, I can see are popping back into being really, really important. And that's rejuvenate your first impression. That's the prepare part. Also practice new delivery basics, some delivery basics, which is how you say what you say. Some are standard, classic, don't forget them. And then there's a few things I'm going to ask you to pay special attention to. And then just a few things on rethinking design and use of visuals. We've fallen into traps with that before, and we want to make sure we're moved out of that trap now and in the future. And then in the last part, talking a bit about, I think, what really keeps us as speakers really, really successful is when we can engage and adapt face-to-face to the audience. So what I'd like for you to think about as you listen today is spending more time thinking about your first impression. So you're all from different spots, I'm sure. I think you're probably entering this webinar thinking about a particular audience that you need to speak to. Maybe now, maybe it's an audience you've spoken to in the past, but you want to re-up and re-energize what you do in front of them. You might all be thinking about different scenarios that you'll be in. And the audience awareness is, believe it or not, Aristotle said this many years ago, audience awareness is the absolute most important thing. And so I'm going to mention it. Don't go before a group without knowing something about that group, knowing something meaningful about that group that's going to help you give them what they want to have. So that's the first thing to think about. It has really nothing to do with how you're speaking or even quite yet, even what you're writing. You're thinking about how can I adjust this to my audience? You can do it through sophisticated surveys, etc., or you can simply doing it by setting up a chat or a team or something where you can get to know what does this group really want. So don't forget that. And that's the first part that begins the building block of your first impression. There are a lot of other things to come. I wanted to share with you right now something that I discovered not long ago, and it is called kintsugi, and it's a Japanese custom of repairing broken pottery. But look what they do. They compare it with gold. And that analogy is coming out of hard times, meaning broken, with something even better, stronger than before. Would you think of this perhaps as you think about your own presentation skills? Have you forgotten some things? Are there some things that you want to change anyway? Are there some things you've learned from all of the virtual meetings that you want to pull into your face-to-face presentations? But I just love this analogy of how, because things have changed, and maybe if you look at it on just first sight, maybe change not for the better, but there's a lot we can learn and make it even better. So still on this idea now of what happens before we even begin the speech. Here's something I'd like you to think about. People are not all back to work 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 6 evenings a week, whatever we worked. That's not quite happening yet. There's still a lot of part-timers are coming back 2 days a week and then being flex time with their family at home. And it looks like that may not change a lot. It's not changing a lot right now. Interestingly, people who are coming back into work are about 45% of them are liking it a lot. And then the percentages kind of change based on personal perception and desire. But while we're at work, we're there for less time. So we really need to make the most of it. So if any of you out there, well, you don't have to be a manager, actually, I'll change that. Any of us can help use that time well. Time is so very, very important. And that's why what's showing, this may look a little odd to you, but what is showing first before you open your mouth to speak is how you use time, how you're listening, and how you're showing caring. So what in the heck do I mean by that? In the office situation, we are going to need some guidance. We're going to need to set some new templates, some new parameters on how we're using time, especially when it comes to meetings. We are used to kind of going off in our cubicle or our area with our laptop alone and working. We are less used to and need a little bit of dusting off to being together in meetings and using that time wisely. Let me share something with you. When we study nonverbal communication, there is a term called chronemics, and chronemics is the study of how we use time. And your team, if you're the team leader, is watching that. You are also watching them. Are we using the meetings productively? Are we getting to know each other as human beings again, face to face, productively? It can be some of the simple things like contacting someone on text or email and just asking what they might want to get out of the meeting today, or asking if they would like to take 5 minutes of the meeting today. We need to take the lead and project what we expect from them and what they expect for us. So I want to share a few things that looking at them might seem like little things, but the little things are what is really big. One example, if you allow lateness into your face-to-face meetings where you're going to be speaking, or if you don't announce that you want to be very strict on the start time, your participants come to expect that. They just kind of let it slip right in. So we need to be very aware of how we're using time. Another thing about time is in the speaking time that you take. Do not ever go over the time that you have told people you will take. This workshop today is not going over approximately 50 minutes on my end and QA on your end, because that's what we planned and that's what you expect. And using time now face to face is going to be very precious how we use it. However, that doesn't mean that all the time needs to be used with you speaking. I would like to encourage you, if you've not done much of this before, is to engage your group as either as you begin or early on after you make your first statement and objectives. So let's take a little bit more at this, and what I call little things are big. And this is for you as a speaker. I will address you as the speaker of the meeting or one of the speakers. If you can't get there early, just be on time. Early arrival has saved me so many times as a speaker. I've adjusted seating. I've tested AV. I've checked that a leaflet or a learning packet was available. And one time, the night before, the maintenance person had accidentally thought they were throwaway and I didn't have them. So all of that kind of thing allows you a chance to set yourself up for success with the meeting. When you arrive a little bit early, if you're at a larger venue, like a large auditorium, a large conference room, have a little bit of conversation with whoever is there. That will calm you down a bit because we're most nervous right before we speak. That's proven in research. And it will also give you a chance to kind of focus on what's important and what other decisions need to be made around that meeting. It can be something as simple as looking at who's there with you and saying, "Hi, how's it going?" Or "It's great to see you." Just opening up the fact, what we don't want to look like is we don't want our heads poured down in our phones, my phone, or down in my laptop immediately. It makes us look much more professional, much more caring if we greet other people and start a little chit chat. I'd love to encourage you to do this all the time. With my students at DePaul, I admit with them, it's a little hard to do when you're a student. Sometimes you're just flitting back and forth between classes, but you'll be amazed that every class I teach, there are several students who do. And guess who I know the most? And guess who I smile at when I come in? The students that are there early. So I encourage that. Even if you're not naturally extroverted, it's a really great thing to do. There are some things that relate to face-to-face now that we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. But you do want to watch as you enter your speaking space, you do want to watch your energy. Those of us who work, typical work days, might kind of get into that lower energy that happens at work, where we're just working on a lot of different projects piled up. What I have learned from watching professional speakers in my speakers group, National Speakers Association, they don't do that. The minute they're in the room, there's energy. So if you can find from a happy posture, get yourself, when you're presenting, in lighting where you can be seen, and don't ever present in a dark room. I know some of you medical folks have to have somewhat darkness to be able to see some of the specifics that you're showing on your slides. Last thing I want to share with you is a little tip, which I learned from my minister at church when I was on my church board. There were about 8 of us on the board. I can't quite remember. And he would always begin with a statement of the agenda on what was on the meeting news that night. And then we would go around and share joys and concerns. And when he first said, I'd like you each to share a joy and concern with the table, I thought, well, isn't that kind of personal? But you know what? We just picked what was comfortable for us. By the time we had done that, we had spent really not much more than 8 or 10 minutes warming up for a 3-hour meeting. And we had a sense of where everybody was at. So perhaps you can do some piece of that at some point as you plan. All of this is part of planning, setting yourself up for success. So let's review. You want to start with knowing about this crowd that's coming, even if it's 3 people in the cafeteria or 600 in an auditorium. You want to do your best to give yourself that kind of information, and that will really help you. When people consult with me for doing a wedding toast or a eulogy, that's the key that I always say. Start first by asking questions, and then you can insert your own stories about it. So those are some things for you to shine when it's your turn to present. And while I don't really have a slide here on handling nerves, I'd be interested at this point on any of your questions about preparing, getting ready, thinking about what do you think about before, and this is going to be our next topic, you actually begin to deliver this face-to-face talk. So I'll pause there a minute and find out if there's any questions you have about preparing, the importance of face-to-face speaking, anything like that.
For everyone, as a reminder, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. One question that we have, Cyndi, is how do I practice not reading my notes now that I am face-to-face?
So notes are very important delivery basic. And notes people tend to want to just present right from the PowerPoint, right from the slide, whereas notes are so helpful. I'm using notes today so that I can remember the detail behind what I have on the slide. So to practice with notes, I like to say practice 3 times standing up with notes, standing next to your laptop. That way you can pretend to recreate what's on the slide with what's on your notes. I discourage old-fashioned index cards. They tend to be out of order, or you accidentally drop them, or you can't read what's on them. And I discourage a lot of written out sentences on notes. Notes should be phrases. You should use highlighter. They should be very easy to access as you're looking down, and then as you're looking back at your slide. Okay, you're very welcome. We're just gonna proceed on with this whole idea of eye contact, and eye contact being back is actually very important as well, because now you can look at people for sure for about 5 seconds each. When we're on a virtual meeting like I am right now, and with there's really nobody in front of me right now. I'm just sort of talking to myself. But when you're in front of a group, it's important to establish direct eye contact with the group, and with all around the table. And if you have a huge crowd, if you're that kind of a speaker, you look in each direction, share the direction that you're looking with the group. Have some kind of note. It will help you if you have a momentary just brain fog, or if you have maybe a difficult situation where you want to look down. So I encourage notes. I like to use about a half sheet of paper in front of a group along with my slides. So here are some other things that you can plan in advance. Let me see which ones. Your opening words are even more important than they ever were before. I remember when I was doing virtual classes at DePaul the last couple of years, I still wanted to think about what am I going to say first, other than just, hi, welcome to Unit 13. And we all should do that. So now that's really important. You can put up a slide that grabs attention. You can play a little video vignette. You can tell a short story that ties into the topic. You can tell something funny and self-deprecating about yourself that people will smile at. You know, people love to hear when we share something we did wrong and then we tried to correct it or corrected it to the best of our ability. All of these kinds of things can be ways to open other than, okay, hello, everybody, here's our team meeting today. So you're balancing time. Here's where time comes in again. In that opening, and as you're planning what you're going to do, you are balancing time. When I ask my clients and students to begin in an interesting way, that's a common question I'll get. How long do I have to do that? Well, you have to gauge that based on how long you were expected to talk. By the way, if you are asked to do a 7 to 8 minute presentation, that's what you do. Don't do a 15-minute presentation. People are expecting you to get your point across in the time that you have. I talk about delivery basics being what the audience sees and what the audience hears. And the reason eyes, again, are so important, they see our eyes, our hands, and our stance or posture. But now we are back to standing in front of a group again, which gives us power. So when you stand, you want to stand ergonomically with your shoulders back and your feet slightly apart. You don't want to, there's all kinds of things people do. They lean on one hip, they lean on the podium. The podium's not for that. The podium is for notes, not for you. And a lot of the presentations most people do are not behind a podium anyway. So what the audience sees is important. And these are three things people seem to be able to comment about very readily. Like, he didn't look at us, he kept looking down. Or, oh, their hands were so great, they used them so much. Or I wish that they wouldn't have, slumped over the table that way. So Aristotle talked about speaking as being truth-telling. And when you think about non-verbally what you're doing, it should be under the banner of truth-telling, your best ability to truth-tell. What the audience hears, absolutely essential that you be loud. So I am just going to move us into what the audience should see as far as your standing voice. Patsy Rodenberg, who wrote the book, The Right to Speak, has such a neat little quote. I put it there for you. We speak, and someone quickly takes our measure. Through voice and speech, we portray ourselves. So don't feel it's silly at all if you don't want to think about your standing voice. We all have great breath control capability if we use our diaphragm. Right now, I'm speaking more loudly than I normally would. And so here's what you should do. If you have any concerns about your voice, tape it, have someone listen to it, giving you feedback, work with a coach, absolutely. If you're getting negative feedback on being too soft or too high or up speaking, which is where the end goes like this, you want to avoid this. So use a standing voice, and here's the different pieces of the voice. You want to sound dynamic and confident rather than monotonous and boring. So again, if you think you're not being heard, have practice in a large room with a friend or a significant other or a caregiver in figuring out your voice. All right. So the delivery basics that I wanted to review with you, the main change has been back when we were talking about eye contact. And so another way to establish eye contact is to know the first minute's cold. This also helps your nerves. Even if it's a small team meeting, know how you're going to start. That's the main thing to think about. And then, of course, the meeting itself will unfold as you design your bullet points or your 3-part outline, or however you typically do a speaking outline, which is pretty much the same virtually and face-to-face. So I'm not covering outlining here too much. So you want to perhaps also, and this is in the topic of eye contact, you want to really be careful with your design and use of visuals. What has really helped me is PowerPoint, the Microsoft PowerPoint program's Design Ideas tool, which is in the latest version of it. The slides you see in front of you today were reworked automatically by Design Ideas. So this one, I had a lot of different options, the one we're looking at right now, for how I might lay out this. Is PowerPoint still used? Yes. Other kinds of computer graphics are used. Google has them. There are many other companies that are presenting them. If you just go online, you'll see a lot of companies presenting samples of how they would help you with your video. And that would give you an idea of what's out there. But basically what's out there is pretty much how you see my visuals today, although they are admittedly very simple compared to what other types of fields need to do. My medical folks, architects need much more advanced kinds of templates and graphics than I have today. But I have just found that when you have a slide in front of people, that's what they're looking at. They're not looking at you. They're not listening to you. So if I've seen any changes, it's been making sure visuals are simple. I'm finding that my Gen X students are really, Gen Z students are really very aware of how to do all this. They've done it in school since they were, 4. And they're very good with headlines as far as where they're headed next, better than some of my coaches in business. So think about, why is the slide up there? Be very savvy. Do not have a lot of bullet points. This is all the bullet points you should ever have. Is what have I got here? 6. And because they should be helping you, not taking away from you. I work with some lab technicians, and for them to think about that slides should be helpful to the audience to learn is very important, rather than reproducing what they discovered in the lab that day. These are the 3 main things I see that are problems. Too much, trying to put too much in a presentation. There is a bit of a miscommunication there. If you have too much, actually, it can make you sound less credible. So a lot of times my beginning speakers are the ones that have this problem. And then slow down, pause, insert a story. Like at the beginning, I had the story about the triathlon, etc. So what could you do to take you away from this speed that's just dynamo and people can't listen anyway? So too much, too fast, and believe it or not, too apologetic. I just wanted to, just for fun, read to you a few of the actual apology statements that Kevin O'Connor and I, my co-author, in our book, Present Like a Pro, we've listed these. We've actually heard these statements from speakers. This won't take long. I know you're all ready for lunch. I know you've heard this material before, but I need to review it anyway. You don't know me, but I know we're over time and I'll try to do my best to get you out of here as soon as possible. Well, I don't have much time and I have a lot to say, so I better get started. Maybe this has already come across earlier today, and I'm sorry if it has, but I'm going to repeat. You probably can't read this slide, but it says, if I had my slides with you, I could show you this. Oh, I'm sorry you don't all have a copy of this data, and there were even more. It was just 3/4 of them. So do not apologize. It's your party, it's your show, and be a cheerleader for what you have to say. So we've talked about voice a bit. I am now going to move into the last portion, which is leading a good meeting, engaging and adapting face-to-face. And then I'm going to be closing with a few of the best tips from our book, Present Like a Pro. But I'm going to stop here and ask what questions there might be. They don't have to relate to delivery skills, but if we do, it will let me know what things maybe I touched on or didn't touch on that are on your mind with respect to delivery, which is how you say what you say. It's your eyes, your hands, your stance or posture, then your volume, how fast or slow you are. And one thing I forgot to mention is how you use pause, or are you in the habit of filler words?
Cyndi, one question we have here is, do you have any favorite book recommendations to help us become better speakers at meetings?
So if I heard that right, better recommendations to help be better speakers at meetings?
I apologize. Any book recommendations to help become better speakers at meetings?
Oh, yes, I'm going to start with mine. Why not? It's called Fearless Facilitation. And Kevin O'Connor and I wrote it, and I'll make sure you get information about it, whoever asked that question. That is one that we wrote strictly for how to facilitate meetings and how to prep for them. And it's also the next topic here in our workshop today. But if there's something more specific you wanted around that, or a specific book, I would be happy to brainstorm with you some more. There are in the section in both the library and the online bookstore, whatever, you might find books like that, recent books on meetings. If you just type in the word, the books that I've had on meetings typically have come out of my background in training and development. And there are several other good authors in that field.
One other question here is how to prep guest speakers so they also shine.
Yeah, that is so important to do. Again, it's pre-planning, and it's meeting with them and talking with them about the audience and what the audience might expect. I would make sure they understand the time limit and the key things that you would like them to present. Then you, as the person bringing in the guests, need to take on the role of just a good media moderator and have good questions that the guest knows you're going to ask them, because the guest is probably less familiar with the audience that you're bringing that person in for. The only challenges I've had with guest teachers over the years has just simply been too much, keeping them under the time control. Thank you for that. I'm going to go on now and talk about how to be a facilitator, which is very much related to presenting as well. So let's imagine there was a question about meetings. Let's imagine that you're expected to come to the meeting with your own data. You're expected to lead a good meeting that's interesting. What people may not expect you to do, but what you can learn to be very good at is facilitating, which means to help make the meeting and what you're talking about easy for people. So that involves listening. Remember back at the beginning, I said what's showing? What's showing is how you use time, how you listen, and how you care. Facilitation brings in especially the last two. It shows your group that you're listening, and you can use tools to help you do that. So let's look at a few of them that help you listen live. In front, leading the meeting, if you want to use good facilitation skills, you can use things like I'm suggesting here. They're called probes, they're called paraphrases. You may not have heard of the tag and add, which is a little trick that Kevin O'Connor and I came up with. It's like a paraphrase, except it's not quite as long. You just listen to what the person says and kind of repeat the last couple of words. So if you've got a meeting, let's say, and somebody on the team says, well, what if we didn't finish that section with ABC client over in Dallas? To tag and add, you would do something like that. The Dallas client? Yes, thanks for bringing that up, Cyndi, blah, blah, blah. So you're just kind of letting them know that you heard, but you're not doing a full paraphrase. I'd like to see all of my speakers be more comfortable with these kinds of things. You just have to get in the habit of including that. Here are a few classic tips about pre-meeting planning. Be very clear about who's going to lead and facilitate and how long you're going to take. I can't emphasize time enough now that we're in this new world of part-time face-to-face. However, that doesn't mean we rush through things and get highly technical. It means that we always remember that we're people, and people want to share. Most people want to share at some point. Some are a little more less assertive about it, but people want to know that what they do matters. So keep all of those things set. Do you need ground rules? Maybe you want to say at the beginning of the meeting, it's so great to see you all here back in the room again, and I want to really honor your presence. What I do plan to do midway through the meeting is take a moment and have you all share for a minute what's been going on in your life. I do want to take a moment now and set this ground rule. Let's keep to our time that guidelines that we've set up, so that people aren't all just kind of wallowing there around the table, not expecting you to take the lead as the meeting organizer. So get it out on the table. Don't assume people know these things. A client I worked with, a really very trendy ad agency. This was right before COVID, when we were talking face to face. This is what they needed the most help with, was getting pre-meeting planning and expectations up there, because once you're in front of the group, it is harder to do these kinds of planning things. It's important to get them out on the table. Every group has an expert as well, and so it is not a bad idea to sometimes ask people to help you with a meeting, like introduce the topic such as you know it, and then each meeting have someone be sort of the meeting expert of that, the subject matter expert, and be sure that you share that it's not always the same person, or you're defeating your purpose. And people will be happy, to share something that they know a lot about for some reason. And of course, that depends on the type of business that you have, that sort of thing. So who is the expert, and let them shine. So here are some ideas on if you want to get a group. Let's say you have a group that's not used to this kind of stuff, and suddenly there you are, the speaker, the leader of the meeting, and you're asking them to contribute. So here's some things you say to adults in a meeting. Your perspective, Effie, is important, and we want to hear it. Or if someone is throwing something out at you that you don't expect at all, you can say something like, well, that's certainly a valid point of view, or thank you for that thought. In front of adults, as a speaker, as a meeting leader, we never want to have our big battles unless it's said at the beginning of the meeting. It is okay to do this at this meeting. Difficult arguments, difficult feelings, difficult opinions are going to be met with defensiveness. And you, as the meeting leader, as the speaker, are there having to manage it. So I would encourage you to get people involved, but also to be ready to manage things that might be unexpected that they might say. And that's where you can use these softeners, which is, thank you for your thought. Well, that's clearly a concern. It's just a very professional way of handling a question answer session, which is what my DePaul students do with their persuasive speeches. They have to handle a question answer session, because this is when things pop up that you don't expect. It's like the cold water in Lake Geneva. So moving here towards my final takes on some of these things about dusting off, I want to share with you what a magician, a comedian, and a 91-year-old told me when I was interviewing them for our book, Fearless Facilitation. And the question to them was, what's the number one thing you've learned when you come into, a room, or from, you've learned as a speaker, as someone who's in front of the group. And the magician said, I find out now what not to do. So from his contact, from his client, he asked, is there anything that I should be aware of that I should not do at all? The comedian said that what he liked to do as a comedian, as a performer, is stand in the back of the act, the gig before him, because it gets a sense of the energy in the room. We can do something similar to that sometimes if we're speaking at a conference, or even if we're leading a meeting at work and our meeting is next in the conference room, we can get a feel for what's going on in the room and the energy of it. And that helps. I do that when I speak at large conferences. I try to go to the workshop that's in the room that I'm going to be in next, just to get a feel for things like lighting and seating and that sort of thing. The 91-year-old that I interviewed was my dad at the time, and he was in a nursing home. And I said, well, Dad, I see on the bulletin board, you have a lot of speakers coming in here frequently to talk about things. I said, what do you think of them? Are they good? And he kind of, he thought for 5 seconds, and he says, yeah, well, they're okay, but they get in the way of our bingo game. So that sort of brought me down, my ego down as a speaker. And I said, thanks, Dad, that's true. We must keep in mind that the audience has their own agenda. They have their own work orders. They have their own thoughts that are not always on what you have to say. And that we need to be aware of that we're not we may not be the star of their day. Okay. So in closing, close your meeting, close your speeches, please. You can say something really truthfully sincere and admirable to the audience. You can, let them know how much you enjoyed working with them. I've never worked with a group anywhere where I've asked the question, does anybody here get, too much praise? Too much praise, anybody? Guess what? We all enjoy a compliment in a group from a speaker. Also, you can use speaker techniques where you go back to the beginning and refresh what you wanted them to remember. So in this presentation, I wanted you to remember that what is showing is how you use time, how you listen, and how you care. Those are the 3 things we should think about more as we're dusting off our presentation skills. I love this ending of a financial planner. I know, please let me know if you have any questions or need anything at all, and then give them a very specific follow-up information. So one of the things that we found out in researching, et cetera, in our book is that every time you speak, you are presenting, really. It's your party. This happened to be my 4-year-old party. I wasn't nuts about the balloon hats, as you can see. I'm pouting. As I look back at that, my mother worked very hard on those balloon hats and crayon aprons, and I sure wish I had not been so pouty. It's your party. It's no one else is losing sleep over your speech. So know that every time you speak is important. Every time you speak, you're presenting. Every presentation is either a chance to move forward or backward or stay in place. So happy dusting. May you continue to shine as a speaker, whether you're leading a meeting, a small group in your cafeteria, or a huge conference event. I've put 3 of my books that I think are most relevant to this talk, and they're easily available at Amazon and other places. And if you have any trouble getting them, let me know. Fearless Facilitation will cover more about engaging, facilitating your group. Present Like a Pro is a review of all the things that a professional speaker does all the time, continuing to dust. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Effie and Erica, for putting this together. And I'll take any other questions if you have them.
Thank you, Cyndi. You really emphasized the importance of timing in your presentation. One question we have here is, when you lead a meeting and have a time constraint, is it professional to set a timer?
Sure, why not? I mean, they're easy now with our phones. No one else has to know. when speakers ask, student speakers especially, ask me if they can just bring their phone up while they're speaking and timing, their 7-minute speech that way, I tend to, I tend to say, okay, but be careful that you don't get distracted by it. So what I've tended to do is have someone in the audience just time the speaker and raise their hand when they're at a certain time. In a professional field or at work where you don't really want to do that, you don't want someone else timing you, maybe you could, but you could just put the time on your phone. Just tell yourself not to stare at your phone too much and look at your time. I used to just take off my watch and put it on the podium too, and just have it there where I could look at it.
Thank you, Cyndi. You also kind of talked a little bit about engaging with your audience. Do you have any recommendations if there's an audience member who maybe is a little bit long-winded, maybe getting a little bit off topic, and how you kind of bring everything back to the topic at hand?
Oh, I know. Why is that person always at, our meetings? They help a lot because they can energize, but then the leader, the speaker, is kind of stuck in that awkward position of thinking, I've got to manage this. I've got to control this a bit. And yes, groups I've worked with have had this problem. So you have a couple of choices there. You can interrupt at some point if you feel it's necessary by saying their name, such as Cyndi. Thanks so much for your thoughts on this. I'm looking at our agenda right now, and I do need to move on. Let's bring this up at another time. Or that's really the best way to do it. That's a polite way to interrupt and let them refer back to the time, that sort of thing. Usually in that case, everybody at the meeting knows they're over talking and they're waiting for you to do something about it. If you can in any way do it with humor, that's fun, but that's kind of tricky too. The main thing is adults never want to look bad in front of other adults at a meeting. So we need to be really careful how we manage that. But the group is expecting you to. They're expecting you to. Just as in school, we expected the teacher to take care of these, anything that happens that would involve discussing something that we didn't know what to say. So.
Thank you. And then another question we have here is, do you have any recommendations for a speaking group like Toastmasters to continue fine-tuning your skills?
Yes, there is a group called National Speakers Association of Illinois that I became very involved in. It's a chapter of National Speakers Association, which is a national association. It's based in, I believe, Denver, of many speakers, and it will really, you can attend as a guest. Finally, you will want to join. There are certain different regulations, et cetera, around joining. We have a chapter that meets all over Chicagoland. I know these calls are coming in from everywhere, but there are chapters throughout the country. At one point, I think there were 38 chapters. I'm not sure that's exactly it, but if you Google National Speakers Association, nsaspeaker.org, you've got a group of people who are very professional. Oh, they just did so many helpful things for me. When I came into the group, I had a solid background training and development, but I hadn't really perfected this art of delivering speaking. And they also helped me be brave enough to begin my books. So yes, Toastmaster is one of the places that you can certainly build your skills. And then National Speakers Association is the one I would strongly recommend to you.
Thank you. And then you spoke a little bit about the importance of having facilitator at meetings. What if the speaker is the one who goes off topic? How would you manage that?
You mean, I'm wondering, does this questioner mean if you're not speaking, someone else is, and they're going off topic, and then how in the heck do you do it from the audience? You think that's what it is?
That's my understanding of it. I think if the speaker is the one that's going off topic, yep.
Oh boy, yes. I think, again, you have to do a version of interrupting. And you could probably have to do it more physically, like standing up interrupting the speaker. Again, if it were me, if I were going, I go, Cyndi, thank you for this. Thank you. We appreciate this point of view. Could we take it back to, or I know our audience is interested in, and then bring up something else. I think you almost, if you can't physically do it, raising your hand as if you're asking the speaker a question, and then very politely but firmly, you could even refer back to the agreement with the speaker. Like, Cyndi, in our contract together, you had mentioned talking especially about handling a difficult audience, something like that. Could you please get into that more? And kind of being assertive with the person.
Cyndi, another question. You talked a little bit about using humor, and that's an aspect that can help a presentation. What if it's something you attempt and it doesn't go as you had hoped?
I've had that happen. You know what? Don't belabor it. I would definitely not advise doing what some comedians do, like, well, that went over like a lead egg, or, I mean, why? If it just kind of dies, just move on and figure out why. I had the same story get just blank stares in response for one group, and the same story get a lot of laughter in another group. I don't know if it was how I timed it. I practiced that story trying to figure, is this me? What am I doing? So the time that it just kind of died, I know I wouldn't say, well, gee, that didn't go over. I would never put myself in that spot. I'm all for, it's your party, be a cheerleader for what you did and move on. Chances are that the audience isn't making as big a deal of it as you think they are, because they're thinking about something else most of the time anyway.
Okay, and just one last question here. You covered this a little bit in your presentation, but just top of mind, what are your top tips for someone who may be a very nervous speaker?
Oh, that's a great way. This is the last question, Effie. What a great way to end. Practice. If you practice and the words have already been through your head 3 or 4 times, it's going to help your nerves, because you'll get up there or you'll stand up and your mind basically is telling your mind, I know this stuff. I've said these words before. I'm going to start with that quote on dusting because I know this. So practice. By the way, the National Speakers Association did a survey on this very question, and that's what most people said. Practice is what will help nerves the most. So after practice, what you should do then is mingle. That's a big one for me. If you can't mingle with an audience, or if you can't talk to somebody else about something other than your speech, just do the best to get there early. If you can't get there early, just do the best to sit down in your seat and engage in whatever is not your speech. To have your speech in front of you and kind of last minute studying it at the event it's terrible. Don't do that. Breathe deeply. Wear clothing that you feel good in. Make sure you practice with the notes you're going to use. Do not write it all out. Keep them in phrases. Start with something kind of fun or different that gets people looking at you a little differently, like a little story about the 2 6-year-olds in your neighborhood, Tucker and Christopher, and how they taught you how to, avoid rollerblading, or it's something that you tell that's your story that makes you look professional up there. So in review, practice, mingle if you can. If you can't, just focus on something else in the room. Do not write out word for word, and use any kind of short little story you can. It doesn't have to be the first thing out of your mouth, but early on, so people kind of can say, oh, well, they have their act together. They thought of that story. That's cool. Those are a few things. Breathing deep, sipping water, having a glass of water nearby, better than a bottle of water, can also help you feel more confident about speaking.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cyndi, for taking the time to share your expertise with us. We really appreciate it. And as a professional you are, we are right on time. So thank you for sharing that example with us as well. I also want to thank our participants for joining us. We hope to see you at another event soon. You can find a complete list of our events on our website, which is alumni.depaul.edu. Thank you so much, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.